Louis and Travis, welcome to the Beyond the Tools podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dig into your story. I think there is so much for you guys to share, and you have obviously seen such exponential growth in such a short period of time. For our listeners who are tuning into audio only, I think it's always good to match the voice with who's speaking. So maybe Louis, you can introduce yourself quickly first, and
Yeah,
then over to
absolutely.
Travis.
So my name is Louis. I'm the co-founder of Prestige Home Improvement, pretty much born and raised in Ottawa, Gatineau. Started the company with Travis about a little bit over 3.5 years ago. And yeah, like you said, it's been pretty fast growth pace, and I'm excited to be talking about it.
Yeah, and then my name is Travis Moriarty. I'm one of the other co-founders, obviously, of Prestige. And yeah, we started the business. Both me and Louis come from a sales background, which is a little bit different, I guess, from the traditional side of starting HVAC business. And we've experienced lots of growth over the last few years. So excited to talk about it a little bit more.
Awesome. Thank you guys. And yeah, I really want to dig into that story because you guys came from really different backgrounds before starting Prestige Home Improvement. So, how did this happen? How did you guys transition into heating and cooling?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, basically the background story is like I was a bartender and always had kind of like the entrepreneurial mindset. So bartender with side projects going on all the time. And Travis on his side was a personal trainer. And when COVID happened, obviously we lost our jobs. And after a little while of just waiting and not being sure what to do, we landed on this HVAC sales job. Um, as the industry is technically an essential service, right? People need to heat and cool their home. And so the sales department was also in theory essential. And so we got the sales position at an HVAC company, and that's where we kind of started in the HVAC industry, and we learned everything about furnaces, heat pumps, and whatnot. And yeah, after maybe a year and a half of like just working sales, like we jumped to a second company after a while, and we kind of realized that we didn't really align with like the most of these companies' like values and how they run. And so we figured we'd start it ourselves essentially, and that's when we had the idea for Prestige Home Improvement. So made a website, incorporated, and yeah, the rest is history.
Wow, just like that.
Just like
And
that.
and Travis, for you, did you ever envision going into the trades? Like, was this something that you were interested in before, or this all just kind of magically aligned?
yeah. No, I always tell people it was very random the way that we fell into it. Like Louis was saying too, it was both more out of, the world shutting down and us not having our jobs anymore that we both randomly got, a sales opportunity in the industry, which I didn't even realize was a career path at the time. I thought it was the guy that was hiring us. I thought that it was actually a personal training job. So I thought it had something to do with the fitness industry. So even going into the interview, I wasn't sure that it was part of the HVAC industry. So it really wasn't planned. But as we got into the industry and then learned a little bit more, it's just become extremely interesting too. And it's one of those things too that especially in Canada, people are always going to need, HVAC services, heating and cooling, and it's a very large industry that's growing very fast. So I feel pretty blessed to just kind of accidentally have fallen into this path, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's crazy. And so you guys were friends before, or you knew each other beforehand?
No, actually, that's how we met. So basically, the first place that we were working at, um, I think just before I left that place, we only really crossed paths for about three to 4 weeks, and then I left to a different company. And then about a month later, Louis showed up at that company as well. So we met. We met just doing work, doing sales together, and kind of headed off. So that's how it all started.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's awesome. So, yeah, I guess kind of falling into this industry and then deciding, hey, we're going to start this on our own. What made you confident that you could succeed in a technical trades based industry without starting as technicians yourselves?
Yeah, well, the model that we had when we started was fairly simple. It was sales and subcontract the job, right? So we didn't really need all the technical knowledge. Like we needed enough so that we knew what to recommend to homeowners and what we were talking about. But when it comes to the very specific details of like, how to install a furnace or the code book um, of like gas and whatnot, right? And we didn't really need that knowledge. But the tricky kind of like season came in when we brought the installs in-house, at which point we had like a decent amount of experience, connections in the industry, and like we hired people that had the technical knowledge that we needed. But yeah, initially we really just needed the basic knowledge that we had of the industry to sell the job, and then we hired the subcontractors that had the technical knowledge needed.
So, Louis, when you first started, you started with some people in mind to be able to subcontract out that work too.
Yeah, we reached out to people. Honestly, it was almost cold calling contractors and seeing if there was any interest in that kind of arrangement. And there was a decent amount of people that were interested. Obviously, there's people like contractors are always looking for work. And so we kind of vetted the best that we could and essentially started subcontracting. And we kept the good ones. Some ones we just stopped working with. And then yeah, we did that for about 2 years.
Okay. Amazing. Was there a moment early on when you realized that your approach, especially coming from a sales customer service background, gave you a significant advantage?
I think, yeah, as we look back on it, I think that it did give us a pretty good advantage because, I mean, you talk to lots of contractors in the industry, and I think there's a pretty big gap between, there's a lot of people that have very good technical knowledge, but then filling that gap between the marketing and then the sales approach, so actually generating new installs, retrofits, things like that, is actually pretty big. And so, because that's how those are the skill sets that we started with, and we knew how to generate new business. It was easy for us to basically, fund the growth of our business, right? And so we had that as like a staple. And then when we had to, we went through the different challenges of actually bringing everything in house and getting, our in-house technicians or operations managers, things like that. We kind of could afford to make some mistakes because we already always knew how to drive revenue and generate new business, right? Whereas I think a lot of contractors and a lot of companies in general, not even just in the HVAC industry, that's probably the hardest part is they want to grow their team, they want to build their business, but they're stuck at 2 installs, 4 installs a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. And so it's very difficult for them to build their team, even if they're experts on the technical side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've heard 1,000 times that sales solve a lot of problems. If you've got
Yeah.
new customers coming in, money coming in, it does give you a lot more flexibility to be able to fix some of the early issues that come up.
Yeah, 100%.
So, with that in mind, I guess I am curious early on where you're both salespeople, how did you divide roles within the company? Or you both sold and then, yeah, kind of complemented each other that way?
Yeah, well, when we started, we pretty much were doing everything together. So whether it was like organizing the business, preparing like, back end documents and whatnot, and then going to the field, booking appointments, presenting stuff to homeowners, we were pretty much a pair all the time. And it's only when we needed to start like scaling, by scaling, I mean recruiting and hiring salespeople, that we started separating. Travis, there was essentially it started when we hired our first salesperson. Travis took that person to train them. So it was a one-on-one training with them. And I kind of stayed back to work on documentation, preparing some training manuals and such for that next phase of scale. And so when that happened, we kind of fell naturally into more of our roles, and it wasn't really planned, but it turned out very well. Where he kind of took on more of an approach of like being the people person, the leader, like developing people, and I was more on the back end side, finances, accounting, everything that has to do with back end.
Yeah, makes sense. And I know you hinted there in terms of the values of the previous company that you guys worked for, and obviously going into this, everything's very people focused. Travis, can you share a little more about how those values shaped your company culture early on, or what were those values that shaped your culture?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, um, I would like to say that right from the start, we had, our four main core values on the wall, and we decided it right at the start. But I think that it came a little bit later. It came about a year into business as we started to develop like a small team. But I guess to put it simply, some of the places that we worked at, there wasn't really a vision for the company, or there wasn't a vision internally for the people that work there, or even where we're going, right? And so it never really, um, myself and Louis never really, really fully bought in, right? And we didn't see much development happening, or personal development, right? And then the other side of things was um, we really didn't see much customer care, customer service. And so, as a salesperson, your job is to present what you're told that, the company is going to follow through with, right? And then when that doesn't happen, that's when you start to question things. You're like, is this the right place that I'm working, right? And so I guess some of the two main things that we wanted to focus on when we, started the company was, kind of, we learned a lot. So take the good, and then leave the bad, and basically build a company off the foundation of extreme customer service, and really really focusing on putting the customer first. And then as we started to develop the team, we did things a little bit I guess contrary to what a lot of people recommend, but we started with both of our brothers work with us, so we hired our brothers. We hired some close friends of ours as well too. And so as we built this small team, you know, we started to see people develop and really go from, say starting as, booking appointments from leads coming in, to developing into a sales role, to now training other people in sales. And so personal development and people development became a very big part of our base. And so from that, we kind of started to define what our company values were. Um, and from there, it's kind of just been building on top of that.
So speaking of those core values, yeah, so it makes sense that it took some time to really develop those and to actually see what the culture was, as opposed to just choosing some values and forming things from there. So how do you infuse a lot of those values into your day-to-day work lives now that you've established them?
Yeah. Initially, that was like kind of like part of the tricky thing to do, because initially when we were a smaller team, we were living and breathing the values. It was a very tight culture, and as we expanded to Nova Scotia, that was one thing, but then like also just the team growing, it was keeping the values and kind of like the standards and the culture alive. And this is when we really decided to start documenting. So we have like a culture book, and we try to enforce in a way the standards that we have in the culture. Obviously not in a like force, like we're not trying to force it on to people, but we're trying to like sell the vision. And by selling the vision, we're basically saying that like we get there by following these like sets of like values and guidelines. Um, And I think people kind of follow it naturally. We hire the people that we believe fit in the culture, and align with it. And as long as we keep leading by example too, usually people tend to like following that.
Yeah, it makes sense. So it sounds like, as far as the growth journey as well, you had a couple major milestones there. So one was, instead of subcontracting, bringing those technicians in house, and obviously the expansion to another market. So I'd love to talk about that a bit more. Starting with bringing technicians on, what was that process? And was there anything that surprised you about hiring technicians?
Yeah, I think yeah, like you were saying too, this was definitely one of the challenges for us because there was certain advantages we had from, starting from like a sales and more of a, like a marketing background. But then when we started to bring on, our own technicians, in-house technicians, the gaps in our knowledge were, you know, interviewing someone that we think would be a good fit for the role, but we have no sense of their technical skill, became a very big challenge because we definitely hired a lot of the wrong people. We weren't able to go on the job and, see if they knew what they were talking about. We didn't know what level of experience we needed for certain different roles, where it's, someone that has, they may have like 15 years, but looking back, they maybe weren't actually that skilled, or what is, a good skill level for an apprentice, right? And so it took a lot of trial and error, a lot of hiring, the wrong people at the start, and then finding some people that turned out to be a very, very good fit, and then kind of building on top of that, and looking to them for advice, was big, and it was a big help for us as well. Actually, one of the technicians that we hired in Ottawa, he used to be a subcontractor, which I think was very useful because he was able to look at jobs and, you know, basically kind of give us advice on, you know, we need more information for the pictures. We need more notes for technicians to be able to do the job properly, right? If we want to avoid, say, pre-inspections or things like that. So kind of getting lucky, but then also just a lot of trial and error, finding the right people and building on top of that, was definitely, yeah, that was definitely a big help. Um, and then basically from there too, it was just, finding the right leaders and managers as well too. That, a lot of times they had some experience in the field, but then they also know how to manage, contractors and technicians as well. That was a big thing for us as we started to grow the team. And then Lou, I don't know if you want to expand, I guess, on the challenges of the expansion to Nova Scotia, but we basically did both of those things at the same time, which was tricky.
Yeah, that was definitely very tricky. And another thing about like hiring the right people in the install and service department was in people that are typically like tend to be like salespeople versus like technicians are very different personality types. And we were very used to like the personality type of like a salesperson, but the technician was completely new to us. So we needed to adapt and understand how to like talk to them, how to sell the vision to them. A completely different dynamic, right? And so we had to accept certain things that we didn't understand. And then we had to kind of start understanding what type of person they were and how to deal with them, how to manage them, and if they were the right fit for our culture too. Um, and then yeah, when we went to Nova Scotia, we needed to find the right person to put in the operations manager position. Like that was essentially the first step, right? And you want someone that has technical knowledge, but that also has the people skills. Um, and so that was like our kind of our first step because Travis and I would spend a lot of time going there, but we'd mostly be back home in Ottawa. So we needed a reliable leader that would manage the technicians, and it is our biggest operation, and it was right from the start as well. So we right from the get-go, we hired multiple technicians, started um, at 6 guys almost within the first month and a half. And not being there was like kind of like the tricky part. So being able to have a good line of communication with them and trusting the leader in that position was very important.
Hmm. That's really interesting and totally makes sense that you've got to balance, accepting differences in terms of personality, but then also making sure that they fit the culture, they're buying into the vision. What was it that you would say was a key lesson there or a key part of your approach to make sure you achieve that balance?
I think it's still something that we're figuring out. Honestly, open communication and making sure that everyone's on the same page at all times. But yeah, it's HR will always be an ongoing thing that we have to figure out, I think.
I think
Yeah, fair enough.
just to expand on that too, I think one thing that we didn't mention that was it was very, very, I think, necessary for a successful expansion was we had 4 guys that, was part of a small team when we started to grow in Ottawa that actually moved out to Nova Scotia, basically uplifted their lives and went to open up and spearhead that operation. And so, one of them was my brother who actually runs the sales team there in Nova Scotia, and then 3 other core guys that we've had from very early on. And so, one of the challenges when you open up a second location is making sure that the culture and the company basically remains the same. Because sometimes, you've heard many stories where it's like a completely different organization or company compared to what you started with, right? And so having those 4 guys that moved over there, permanently moved, well, permanently, but they moved their lives over there, and they kept the standards, the culture, and the values that we started with in Ottawa was definitely a huge. I think that was one of the biggest reasons that it was a successful expansion.
Mm, yeah, that makes sense. They brought that consistency and that foundation. What was it that made you decide to expand to a second market in the first place?
I think it was we had very high, we still do have very high ambition and a large vision as well. And we were very excited to be expanding. And so we were doing some market research in various markets. Initially, we were thinking on just expanding in the GTA, so like kind of the Toronto area. And it is a very saturated market, but we were pretty confident we could pull it off. And so the guys, Travis and some of the guys were did a couple road trips out there to go and visit some office space. We were literally just about to pull the trigger. They were going to sign some leases on like, apartments. We were looking at office spaces, and then there was like a turning point where we had like one morning a conversation about the Nova Scotia market as a possibility. They had much better rebate programs, and so homeowners could get up to they say up to 30,000, but realistically it usually varies between like 17 to $25,000 that they can get back to install some heat pumps in their house. And most of the homeowners over there are on oil heating. And in Ottawa, this is kind of like where we would try to target. So we'd go in the outskirts of Ottawa, the small townships, where people don't necessarily have natural gas. And so that was always kind of like the like ideal target for us was like a homeowner on oil because we knew we could help them save money as well as like help them with like a high efficiency system. And when we realized that Nova Scotia had like most of their population were still on oil, we were like, this is a gold mine for one, and there's a lot of people to help. The government is funding a lot of rebate programs over there. So it was almost a no-brainer. The only tricky part was moving some of our guys they were ready to go to Toronto, but Toronto is like 4 hours away, which is not bad, right? Nova Scotia, if you drive there, it's 15 hours. So it's a completely different ball game in terms of like distance. We always fly there when we go, whereas if we were in Toronto, we would just drive. And so that was like just the kind of like the obstacle, but we decided that it was probably actually we did a test. So some of the guys along with Travis went and tested the market we generated some leads and appointments, and then they went on, and I think within a week they must have sold like, I don't know, Travis, what was it, like eight jobs or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. I think it was between 12 to 15.
Okay, yeah, a lot more than that. So a lot of jobs were sold in 1 week, and that was kind of like the signal that we needed to go and pull that trigger.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because I've certainly seen this across Canada, and I think as a company that has a solid foundation in sales and customer service, going into some of these smaller markets by population size certainly, that have these really incredible rebate programs available, you're able to dominate that market pretty quickly versus a lot, not all, obviously, but some of the technician led businesses. A lot of times they see the rebates as a bit of a pain, or they're so busy working in the field on the tools that they're not able to scale at the same rate. And I've seen a lot of companies like yours that are able to expand to multiple markets, especially Atlantic Canada, BC, where some of the rebate programs are better. And yeah, I find it fascinating. So, coming from that side of things, what would you advise some of these more traditional technician led companies to do to be able to compete, or even to rethink how they approach their sales?
I think one thing that, I mean, right off the start, it is challenging, the rebate programs, especially in certain markets. It's quite confusing. And I think, just from being at some conferences where it's, we're in a room with a bunch of different contractors where we're already confused, and hearing everybody else ask the same questions and not really getting clear answers. Everybody else is confused as well too. So it can be kind of discouraging at the start to try to get into these programs, try to help homeowners. And it almost gives that feeling of like, okay, what's the point? I'll just tell the homeowner to try to figure it out on its own. But if you look at it from a little bit of a different viewpoint, and you take, spend the time to really learn the process, and even if you need to hire someone else that only focuses on that, because everybody else is confused, you can use it as an advantage. Because I know that for us, for example, especially in Nova Scotia, you know, we we're told by customers that most contractors, pretty much every single one, just tells them to figure it out on their own. The customer will try and end up not really getting even past the second or third step, and then they'll just give up, and there goes the deal. Whereas if you use it as an advantage to really walk them through every step of the way and guide them through the process, well, you're going to get business. You're going to get business when, maybe you're competing with 5, 6 other companies, even if you're more expensive, because we're not the cheapest. We're not the cheapest price out there, right? But we really value the customer service. Just spending the time to walk people through that process will actually gain you business. And so you can see it as just an investment in your company, and your business. But it really, really does bring the returns when you can support these homeowners through this process. Because it is really confusing. Even though we do it, every single day now, there's always changes. It's hard to get clear answers. And so just stick to it, but it could be a huge advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so true, and it's basically it's basically suck it up, but also it's really going to help that customer. It's making it easy for them to say yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anything you wanted to add to that, Louis?
Yeah, well, kind of like just doubling down on that. Be part of the reason we were successful in Nova Scotia is because our sales guys, they part of their job was to help the homeowner through the whole process. And it was kind of like the value like offer that we had. Um, and we realized at some point that it was taking up a lot of their time, like when the pipeline started filling up. some of the guys were spending almost half of their time going back to homeowners' houses and filling out paperwork and all that. So we decided very recently, about a month and a half, 2 months ago, to hire someone in the position of like kind of like customer success. But really, most of their job is to process these documents. So we got them a work vehicle. They drive to the homeowners' houses to help them with the application process and whatever they may need. Make sure they follow through with it so that they get their rebate as fast as possible. And that way, we bought back the time, quite a bit of time for our salespeople to do their job. And also we have someone who's basically their sole role is to make sure the homeowner is being taken care of and that this rebate process goes as smoothly as possible. So if I had to give one advice to some of those contractors, it would be maybe taking a look at developing a department or maybe just one person who their role is to take care of that. Because when you can offer that to the homeowner, it adds a lot of value. Because like Travis says, those like government websites are very complicated and it's a headache to navigate.
Yeah, that's awesome and makes total sense to really just find someone who can be responsible for that. But that's absolutely an investment that will pay off ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Okay, so we've covered a lot here, and I really feel like we could talk all day. I think there's so much that you guys have to share, but I guess so our listeners get a sense of the scale. So you started 3 years ago with two of you in subcontracting. Now you've got multiple locations. Your technicians are in-house. Where are you guys at now? Like, how many people are part of your team?
We have, if I'm not mistaken, 35 employees, 35, including Travis and I. And so 20-ish of them are in Nova Scotia and the rest is here. And yeah, for now, we had some pretty big ambitions of scaling a lot faster over the next couple of years. We had some talks about the BC market, like you brought it up a little earlier, but we realized that with all this growth, we need to really focus on optimizing our operation and making sure that everything runs extremely smoothly before we start the next like phase of expansion, because scaling a imperfect system is not the best idea. So we essentially decided to slow down the growth and really focus on optimizing the foundation. But that's not to say that we're not looking to keep growing in the future. So yeah, I think Travis, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot more work than probably everybody realizes on just things that you think are simple and just internal systems that can be improved on. Um, and then just like Lou was saying, when you optimize just the core foundation and then kind of expand just in your own markets as well too, it could definitely be a lot more profitable than we realized than just trying to open up multiple locations all over Canada, which we are going to eventually do. Um, but as for right now, we're trying to really grow internally, make sure that all the systems are as good as they can be before we take the next step of expansion.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That's pretty big growth in a 3-year period. And obviously, it sounds like now you're regrouping a little, strengthening the foundation there. Otherwise, looking back over the last 3 years, is there anything you would do differently?
I mean, yeah, but I think that's probably a lot of the mistakes that we've made is, I guess, how we've also learned a lot of valuable lessons as well too. So I could say, probably off the top of my head, 10 things we do differently, but it was all part of the process of just learning as well too. Um, yeah, I guess just taking our time and doing a bit more, like say even when you're interviewing people, interview maybe 30 to 40 people for one position rather than one or two. So just trying to really you know make sure that the decisions that you're making that are going to be, a long-term position or something like that makes sense. But that being said, hindsight's always easier to look at things, right? I'm sure we're doing things right now that is probably we won't be doing in a year, and we'll look back and be like, we should have we should have been doing things differently then too. So yeah, all part of the process.
It's always the way.
Mhm. For me, I think that if there was one thing that we could have potentially did different is focusing on one location to bring the install and service in-house, um, instead of doing the two of them simultaneously. It overall we got to where we're at and things are going pretty well. But if we could have focused on one and then figured that out and then kind of replicate at the other, we probably could have avoided some mistakes. And our original model worked very well as far as like it was profitable. It worked like we could like sell jobs, subcontract them to trusted contractors, and so we could have kept doing that. Say, for example, in Ottawa, as we were figuring out recruiting our technicians in Nova Scotia. But overall, no regrets. You know, things are going very well as it is right now.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, I'm sure our listeners are going to want to connect with you guys and learn more. So, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, well, we have a pretty active Instagram page, so it's prestige.homeimprovement. We like to put up funny content and we're very, responsive in the direct messages. Outside of that, mine and Travis's Instagrams, mine is lou.lacombe. So you can find me there, Travis.
Yeah. And then, yeah, just probably same thing. Instagram. Travis Moriarty is my Instagram, and then also LinkedIn too. We're both on there. If you connect with us, we're pretty active on those both.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys. It's been an absolute pleasure and so much to learn here. So, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.